In this tutorial, we are going to practice dividing fractions by using two different strategies. The first strategy that we are going to use is to solve by finding a common denominator of the fractions, and the second strategy that we are going to use is by using the keep, change, flip method. Let's start by using the strategy of using a common denominator. So the first thing that we are going to do is identify our denominators, and we have a 15 and a 3. And the lowest common denominator of 15 and 3 is in fact 15. So what I'm going to do is below here is rewrite both denominators as 15. And one thing that we should keep in mind is if the smaller number can equally fit inside the bigger number, it is that larger number which becomes the common denominator, or the lowest common denominator. Now because this 15 did not change, this 8 will not change either. But this 3 increased by a factor of 5, so we have to increase the numerator by a factor of 5 to keep our fraction equivalent. Now when dividing fractions together, if your denominators are exactly the same, all you have to do is take the first numerator and divide it by the second numerator. So we can actually ignore the common denominator and write 8 divided by 10 in fraction form. So I'm going to write that as 8 divided by 10. And if what you see is a fraction, reduce that fraction to lowest terms, and that is going to be your answer. 8 and 10 have a common factor of 2 because they're both even numbers, so we can quickly just break each one of those numbers in half, which is the same thing as dividing by 2. Half of 8 is 4, and half of 10 is 5. So 8/15 divided by 2/3 is equal to 4/5. Now let's take these same two fractions and divide using the keep, change, flip method. Keep means we just take our first fraction and keep it exactly as it is. Change means we always change our division sign to multiplication. And flip means we write the reciprocal of the second fraction. So that just means simply switch around the numerator and the denominator. So instead of 2 over 3, we must write that as 3 over 2. The next thing that we can do is look for cancellation opportunities. To cancel numbers, you may choose one numerator and one denominator that share a common factor and divide that common factor into each one of those numbers. For example, 3 is common to 3 and 15. So we are going to divide 3 inside 3, and that gives us a result of 1, and 3 may be divided into 15 5 times. And for 8 and 2, they have a common factor of 2. 2 goes inside 2 once, and 2 may be divided into 8 4 times. After you have finished doing any cancellation that is possible, multiply what you have remaining for your numerators to get your numerator, and 4 times 1 is 4, and then multiply your remaining numbers at the bottom for your denominator. And as you can see, using the keep, change, flip method, we also come up with the result of 4/5. Let's try another example. With this example, we have a larger value divided by a smaller value. And whenever dividing something larger by something smaller, the result will always be a whole number or a mixed number. So let's start by using the strategy of finding a common denominator. The lowest common denominator of 4 and 8 is 8. So I'm going to rewrite the problem by using 8 for both denominators. This 8 did not change, so this numerator will not change. This denominator increased by a factor of 2, so we increase this 3 by a factor of 2, and that would give us 6. Now that both denominators are the same, we just have to divide the first numerator by the second numerator. So we can write 6 divided by 1 as a fraction. 6 divided by 1 would be written like this. And 6 divided by 1 is equal to 6. That means that 1/8 can fit inside 3/4 exactly 6 times. If we were to draw a model, we can demonstrate this fact. So what we're going to do is construct a fraction model and break it into quarters. And after breaking it into quarters, we are going to shade it 3/4 full. And after shading it 3/4 full, we are going to see how many groups of 1/8 it would take to fill up the shaded portion. But we are trying to fit smaller units, which are eighths, inside quarters. And what we can do is we can take these quarters and break them into eighths. I'm going to draw a line this way and this way. And notice we now have pieces that are the size of eighths. But you should notice that 3/4 of the entire object is still shaded. Now we can simply count to see how many groups of 1/8 it would take to make the shaded portion of 3/4. So here is one group of 1/8. Here is a second group, a third group, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. So we can see that it would take 6 groups of 1/8 to make 3/4. Now let's quickly solve the same problem by using the keep, change, flip method. So we are going to keep 3/4 the same. We change the division sign to multiplication and we flip 1/8 and write it as 8/1. Next we look for cancellation opportunities. 4 fits inside itself once and 4 fits inside 8 twice. So what I did is identify the greatest common factor of a numerator and a denominator and divided that greatest common factor into each one of those numbers and wrote the result right next to the number. And that is all we can do for cancellation in this problem, so we multiply our remaining numerators to get our numerator. 3 times 2 is 6. And at the bottom we have 1 times 1, and that is a result of 1. And of course 6 divided by 1 is equivalent to 6, which is the same answer that we arrived at when using the strategy of a common denominator. In this example, we also have something larger being divided by something smaller. So we already know that our answer is either going to be a mixed number or a whole number. This time, let's start with the keep, change, flip method. So let's keep the 5/6, change the sign to multiplication, and write the reciprocal of 1/3, which is 3/1. Next, we could recognize that 3 and 6 share a common factor of 3. Or what we can do is just visualize 3/6 as a fraction, and we should recognize that 3 is exactly half of 6. Therefore, the fraction of 3/6 may be reduced to 1/2. So we can write a 1 right next to this 3 and a 2 right next to this 6. The 5 cannot be canceled with anything at the bottom because 5 shares no common factor with a 2 or a 1 other than the number 1, but dividing by 1 will not reduce the number, so that is as low as we can take our 5. So at the top we have 5 times 1, that is 5, and at the bottom we have 2 times 1, which is 2. Now we have an answer that is an improper fraction, so we are going to simplify that and express our answer as a mixed number. To do this, we can take our numerator, which is 5, and divide it by the denominator of 2. 2 goes into 5 2 whole times, and 2 groups of 2 is 4, and that leaves us with 1/2 left over. So the numerator is whatever the remainder is, and the divisor is always going to be your denominator. So 5/6 divided by 1/3 is 2.5. Or we could say that 1/3 may be divided into 5/6 2.5 times. Now, if we were to use the strategy of a common denominator, what we would do is we would write 5/6 exactly the same, but with the second fraction, we would change the denominator to 6 because the denominator of 3 equally fits inside 6. 6 would be the lowest common denominator, and then we would change that 1 at the top to a number 2. Once your denominators are the same, just divide the first numerator by the second. Once your denominators are the same, divide your first numerator by the second numerator. and we write that as a fraction, or 5 divided by 2. And just like last time, we would have to convert that improper fraction into a mixed number. And because we already did that, I am just going to write the answer 2n1/2 after 5 halves. Now with this example, we have a mixed number being divided by a fraction. We are dividing a larger value by a smaller value. So like the previous two examples, we should recognize that our answer is going to be either a whole number or a mixed number. Now when one of your numbers is a mixed number, we have to start by converting that mixed number to an improper fraction. To do this, we keep our denominator exactly as it is. So I'm just going to rewrite the number 2 here, and to get your numerator, you have to do 2 small steps. You take your denominator and multiply it by the whole number to start with. And in this case, we have 2 times 4, which is a product of 8. And you take that result and you add it to whatever your numerator is. And 8 plus 1 is equivalent to 9. So now we have 9/2 being divided by 1/4. Now at this point, we just have to pick a strategy, whether it be finding a common denominator and dividing the numerators together, or the keep, change, flip method. For this problem, I'm going to use the strategy of finding a common denominator. So examining the denominators of 2 and 4, we could deduce that the lowest common denominator is 4. If you ever get stuck finding the lowest common denominator, you could just go off to the side and count multiples of each one of those denominators. And the first match in your list is the lowest common denominator, also known as the least common multiple. So what we are going to do is we are going to rewrite the entire problem using the number 4 as our denominators. So we have to take 9/2 and change that 2 to a 4. And because the 2 doubled, we have to double the 9, which is 18. And the second fraction already is in terms of quarters or fours, so we're going to keep that exactly as it is. Now that the denominators are the same, we really don't need them anymore, so let's just ignore those and focus on the numerators. All we have to do is take 18 and divide it by 1. And 18 divided by 1 is equal to 18. So we would say that it would take 18 groups of 1/4 to make 4.5. Now in this example, notice that the denominators are already the same. So we don't have to find a common denominator because that is already in terms of quarters. So what we have to do first is rename this mixed number as an improper fraction. So the denominator of 4 stays the same. Next we do 4 times 2, which is equivalent to 8, and then add 1 to that, and that is equal to 9. So now we have the problem expressed as 9/4 divided by 3/4. And 9 divided by 3 is equal to 3. So because the denominators were already common, we were able to quickly get our answer. Let's go to the next example. This time we have a whole number being divided by a fraction. Whenever you have a whole number and a fraction, you have to take your whole number and write it as a fraction. And to do this, simply take that whole number and express that as a numerator and divide it by 1. And the reason we put a 1 on the bottom is because we did not change the value of this fraction by writing a 1 at the bottom, because 6 divided by 1 is still equivalent to 6. And next what we are going to do is write a common denominator. And next what we're going to do is just write 3/4 right here and decide what our strategy is going to be. Now if we use the common denominator method, what we could do is simply change this bottom number of 1 into a 4. So if I do that, that would increase this denominator by a factor of 4. So I have to increase the numerator by a factor of 4 to keep things equivalent. And note that 24 divided by 4 is still equivalent to 6. This is just a different way to write the value of 6. we are going to divide that by 3/4. Because our problem is expressed in the same terms or units, in this case quarters, we can simply divide our numerators together, and 24 divided by 3 is equal to 8. So we would say that we could fit 3/4 inside 6 holes a total of 8 times. Now with this example, we have a fraction being divided by a mixed number. So we are dividing something smaller by something larger. And when dividing something smaller by something larger, the result will always be a value that is less than 1 whole. And anything less than 1 whole is a fraction. So we can expect to get a proper fraction as a result of this problem. So let's start by rewriting the problem as 5/6 divided by whatever the improper fraction version is of 2 2/3. So we keep our denominator the same, that's a 3. Next we multiply that denominator by the whole number and then add the numerator. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 more is 8. Now we have the improper fraction of 8/3. And next we have to figure out what our strategy is, whether it be finding a common denominator or the keep, change, flip method. Because we are working with thirds and 6, and I know that it is easy to change this 3 into a 6, I am going to choose the strategy of using a common denominator once again. So I'm going to keep 5/6 the same, but I'm going to change this denominator of a 3 to a number 6. And because we doubled the 3, we have to double this 8, which would be 16. Now we have to take 5/6 and divide it by 16/6. Because the denominators are the same, we really just have to divide the first numerator by the second numerator. So I'm going to write that as a fraction. So 5 divided by 16 can be expressed as 5/16. And if it forms a fraction that is already in lowest terms, you may use that as your answer. So the answer to 5/6 divided by 2 2/3 is equal to 5/16. And we have one last example here. We have something larger being divided by something smaller. So the answer will be either a whole number or a mixed number. And if you have two mixed numbers that you are dividing together, you can estimate just by dividing the whole numbers to get a ballpark figure of what your answer could be. And 9 divided by 2 would be 4.5, so we could say our answer should be somewhere between 4, 5, something like that. So let's start by renaming these mixed numbers as improper fractions. For the first mixed number, we keep that 6 the same, and then we multiply 6 times 9, which is 54, and add that 1 to 54, which would give us 55. And for the second fraction, we keep the 5 the same, and the numerator would be 5 times 2 plus 1, and that would result in 11. Now for this problem, let's use the keep, change, flip method. We're going to start by keeping 55/6, and we are going to multiply that by the reciprocal of 11/5, which is 5/11. And the reason I chose this strategy is because I knew that this 11 was going to be moved down to the bottom, and I know that 11 and 55 share a common factor of 11. And I know that the cancellation would make our job a little bit easier with this example. 11 fits inside itself once, and 11 can be divided into 55 a total of 5 times. Next, we multiply 5 times 5, which is 25, and then we multiply the denominators of 6 and 1 together to get a total of 6. Because we have an improper fraction for an answer, we are going to simplify that to a mixed number. So we are going to take 25 and divide it by 6. And 6 can be divided into 25 4 whole times for a total of 24. And that leaves us with a remainder of 1/6. So we would say that 9 1/6 divided by 2 1/5 is equal to 4 1/6. So when dividing fractions together, you may either find a common denominator and then divide the two numerators together to get your answer, or you may use the keep change flip method in order to get your answer as well.